Morning, everyone. So nice to be here with you. Craig, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Amina. It's great to see all this wonderful crowd on a Wednesday after the end of summer.
There you go. And just as in the way of background, Craig Purser is, of course, the president and CEO of the National Beer Wholesalers Association. I told him backstage, my husband, as an enthusiastic consumer of his product, sends his gratitude and thanks.
I said thank you for drinking beer.
There you go. But this is a man who knows a lot about navigating both state and federal regulations. So we're going to talk today about why all that matters, how you're thinking about this issue, social media and age and access, and what it could mean for the future too.
Sure.
So let's just start with where we are right now, which is to say the U.S. alcohol markets, all of them, right, beer and wine and spirits on all fronts are among the most regulated.
Absolutely.
It's fair to say, at the federal, state, and sometimes even the local level, right?
Absolutely right.
What does that mean in terms of your business operating in this regulatory environment for manufacturers and consumers?
Well, it's interesting because it means a lot of things, obviously, to the business and to the industry, but it also means a lot of things to consumers. Because part of what we have in this marketplace for alcohol, and it is regulated. I mean, in a lot of ways, a lot of people don't like all of their state or their local alcohol laws. People complain about this or that or the other thing. But this system has provided unparalleled choice and value. When you think about the number of selections of beers, for instance, it's really just an amazing marketplace. I'll give you a number. In 1983, there were fewer than 50 breweries in the United States. Fewer than 50. And today, there's over 10,000. That is an American success story. And it's not necessarily in spite of the regulation. In some cases, the regulation has aided that business development.
Well, tell us more about that, because this is the argument we often hear from regulated industries, right? Which is that more regulation will stifle innovation, it will hurt competition. That seems not at all to be the case.
Well, I want to differentiate because more regulation isn't the answer necessarily. Better regulation is the answer. More effective regulation, that which works best. And it's interesting, you almost can't have a conversation about alcohol regulation without looking to the fact that this is a product that's really unique in America. It is the subject of not one but two constitutional amendments, and they were kind of put into place to deal with, it's hard to believe, 92 years ago, we repealed what had been a 13-year ban on the manufacture, sale, and transportation of intoxicating liquors. And that, of course, was the 18th Amendment. Interestingly, in all of their the same short-sightedness, perhaps, that maybe led to prohibition, when Congress and the state legislatures repealed the 18th Amendment with the 21st Amendment, in Section 1 they repealed it, and in Section 2 they gave great authority to the states to regulate alcohol in a manner that worked best. So it's something that the industry has dealt with for going on 100 years. It ebbs and it flows and it evolves, and every year it seems like in legislatures across the country we have robust discussions about what that regulation looks like, but it has resulted in a very effective marketplace. And it's a marketplace that really balances the whole idea of control and revenue collection with competition and availability. And it's not perfect, but it really, I think, is a successful story.
Although I will say, as we joked backstage, prohibition would have been a lot different with social media, I think, if you had TikTok and Instagram back then.
Well, you would have known where to go, and so would the police. So, I mean...
But so better regulation, as you say, and as you're making clear here as well, stressing that states' rules and state regulation should take primacy. A lot of people would say that creates a patchwork of regulations we then have to navigate. You seem to prefer it, though. Why?
Well, it's one of those things because it works, because it gives rise to these successes. And it frustrates some in the industry without question. I mean, the whole idea of why can't I get my beer or my wine or my spirit, anytime, any place, anywhere.
Yeah.
But the reality of it is, when it comes to beverage alcohol, it's a unique product. It can be a great source of enjoyment, and it can tear families apart. And you have to understand that balance. One of the other panels was talking about that whole balancing act. I'm not sure it's an act. It's an objective of trying to balance those competing interests.
So a lot of what we're focusing on here is about social media access, online access, age, all of these issues around that. When you talk about the manufacturer's perspective here and how you reach consumers, right, for an industry that is heavily regulated in who can consume, how and where, all of that, tell me about your marketing, your advertising strategy, how that has changed, how you navigate these issues.
Well, the trade association that represents brewers in our industry, I'll pick on our partner organization, the Beer Institute. They have had in place for nearly 30 years an advertising and marketing code that's actually been pretty effective at helping give guidance and hold to account. And that's a really important word when we're talking about regulation, accountability. But what the Beer Institute's advertising and marketing code has been able to do, and we've watched advertising and marketing evolve, obviously with digital media. But in its origination, it was talking about print, outdoor, and broadcast advertising, and it had a whole set of strict standards about what should and should not be acceptable. Issues even before digital, like looking at marketing demographics and who you're marketing to. As we've watched digital communication become so commonplace, maybe to a certain extent that code needed to catch up. And I'm pleased to see that they've done that, and they've been able to, every year they have an independent review board that hears complaints about marketing. I will say that the distilled spirits industry has a similar code, and I think those have been helpful in holding industry members into account. But that accountability is really aided in alcohol by the requirement of a license. Mm-hmm. And when you have licensed manufacturers selling to licensed distributors and selling to licensed retailers, there's a check there. There's kind of a belt and a suspenders system that I think has served the industry, but more importantly, served the public well.
But when you say the code has evolved, it seems like there's a set of guidelines
Sure.
sort of that people in the industry have to adhere to. Can you give us an example of what's one change that folks have made in that code for the digital era specifically?
Well, it has been, looking at what the tech industry is doing as it relates to age gating.
Yeah.
I mean, and this is something that is not the exclusive remedy to all of these issues. I think we as an industry would not say that's all that's needed. Mm-hmm. That's why it's so important to understand these licenses and the fact that if a retail establishment or a delivery operator sells to somebody underage, there are consequences. They lose that license. They risk forfeiture of that privilege to engage in that commerce. But when it comes to digital, it's been having to update, and apply some of those technology. I think that's why I was glad to do this, because we can learn from each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, give me an example of that. How have you learned? I mean, one of the things about age verification we've been talking about across industries is how kids will find a way to get around it.
Sure.
And there's no perfect way, there seems to be, even with states rolling out age verification rules on social media, there doesn't seem to be consensus about how to do it. So how confident are you in your industry's age verification standards?
Well, I'll give you an example because, and this is really interesting. I think maybe it was the fact that Dr. Gottlieb was here and some of us got to know him during COVID as an expert. But I think when we look at the advent, for instance, of home delivery, mm-hmm. That is certainly a convenience item. We watched in a period of about 6 months in 2020, all of that accelerated by a period of 5 or maybe even 10 years as it relates to the ability of us to get goods and services delivered to our house. And I don't know about y'all's neighborhood, but sometimes you can't find a parking space because there's too many Amazon trucks. I mean, that's the way of the world now. But getting that right was especially important. I was on a Zoom call in 2020, and my wife had called in an Instacart delivery to our house, and I was on with some industry people and a member of Congress. It was an unusual call, and this person from Instacart that was making the delivery, there happened to be 2 bottles of wine and 2 12-packs of beer in with that grocery delivery. And at the time, I'm a mid-50s guy, pretty obviously over 21, and I'm literally on the Zoom call with the member of Congress trying to check in this Instacart delivery, and I can't find my doggone driver's license. And I'm super sorry. I'm kind of embarrassed. I probably wasn't wearing pants. It was COVID, and I answered the door, and for a split second, and this person was not going to leave me this delivery without a copy of an identification. Fortunately, I ran upstairs, found my passport in my sock drawer, and I was able to show that. She took a picture, and we were done. But that's the kind of thing that we've all had to deal with as it relates to there's marketing and then there's sales, and this was a sales example.
It seems like in any industry where age restrictions really matter, right, for safety and protection of minors in particular, there's like a nightmare scenario on social media of your product going viral in some kind of TikTok challenge or something, right? How do you, have you seen that? And also, how do you view that? Is that your responsibility as the manufacturers to get that stuff taken care of and monitor it, or is that on the social media companies?
Well, and I think that people are going to behave irresponsibly, and that's a consumer behavior that you're describing typically. I think it's making certain that the industry is not playing any kind of a role in that at manufacturer, at distribution, or at retail. Many of those things, we're watching all kinds of things on digital media. I've got 3 college-age or graduated kids, and I've seen it all as it relates to all that kind of behavior.
Yeah.
But I think that's where and I'm not an expert on technology or media, and I'm not here to tell folks what to do around that. But some of this goes to responsibility. Some of this goes to engaging in responsible behavior. Some of this comes to parents. Some of this comes to other kids. Saying, hey, is this really a good idea? And it's always a balance. And the balance is, if you engage in that digital communication is going to live forever, and that may have an implication for you, typically young people, not always young people. But we've got to do a better job, I think, of ensuring that those folks understand. Once again, there's that word again, accountability. May affect you when you're 24 or 25 years old looking for that first job.
In the way of that accountability, do you, as an industry, work with social media companies then to address some of that content?
Yes, and especially when it comes to ensuring that these and I'm going to focus on grocery home delivery because the whole notion of that retail sale is so important. That is something that we can affect. That's something that through technology and through the advent of greater education, we can change behavior. Illegal underage purchase and consumption, it's still against the law. And so it is, and it's been interesting to see innovation, just like, there are folks that are innovating to go around the law. There has been a lot of innovation for law enforcement. Many of the law enforcement agencies have access to identification guides that are digital to verify a fake ID. And whether that behavior is digital or whether that's analog, we're watching folks work together to address that. Obviously, when you're talking about delivery, all kinds of questions get asked at the state level. Who is making that delivery? Does that delivery person, that third party, need to be licensed? And we've seen different states deal with it in different ways. But we are typically involved in those decisions and working together to get the best outcome.
Seems like the consensus here is folks working together from all different sides of this. I have like a dozen more questions. I hope we can convene again. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Craig Purser for being here with us today.
Thank you.